All right. Well, welcome to the 11th annual SLO Symposium. Well, my end of it anyway. Um, this is competency-based education, converting mastery into credit earned. And my name is Brian Lee. I'm the High Road Construction Careers Coordinator, and you're probably thinking, what in the heck is that? Well, I am actually I was HVAC faculty as of just a few months ago, and I have a new job here, and that's to promote credit for prior learning and competency-based education. And this is being funded by a grant called High Road Construction Careers. So that's how that came about. Um, and feel free to ask questions or comment as we go. Just chime on in, and I'll do my best to answer. Is one of the event staff going to follow the chat for me?
I can help you with that. Yep.
Okay, that'd be great.
Do you
All
want me
right.
to let you know when the question comes in right away?
Yeah, sure. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we will get going then. All right. So you might be asking yourself, what is CBE? Kind of a new term in the community college world. And there's a great big giant explanation here from the Council of Regional Accrediting Commissions. I'm not going to read that for you, but I guess the point of it being there is that it's a real thing, and I'm actually a product of it. So just a little bit of background. I founded a company, and over the course of 25 years, I built it up and then sold it. And at the age of 45, I had worked myself out of a job. And so I had been associated with Fresno City College as an adjunct instructor since 2011. And anyway, through a matter of circumstances, um, the full-time instructor needed help. He had got sick for the air conditioning program, and so my goal was to, or I was asked to help out if possible. Um, and so one of the things I was missing was a bachelor's degree, which made me would have made me a really good pick for that full-time tenure track position. So I enrolled ultimately in uh, at WGU, Western Governors University, which uses a competency-based education system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So during that, and I did this honestly for my friend because he was going to need help. It was looking like, and so anyway, I ended up earning a bachelor's degree in 2 years in business, and I was pretty darn happy about that. And I had earned my wings through the School of Hard Knocks for sure. It was interesting while I was in working through that program, as I would experience the different elements of the major business. I'd be like, yep, been there, yep, done that. So, and there were areas of that program I moved through very quickly, and there were other areas that I had to slow way down. And honestly, the area that I slowed way down was the general education part, especially math. I hate math. And the part that I zoomed right through was the business side, by and large. So I'm a product of it. I'm passionate about it, and CBE is not something that we're have at Fresno City College yet, but we're hoping to get there through the Applied Technical Division at the least. So um, CBE is a focus on what is needed for a certificate or degree holder to be successful in a professional or civic setting. And can't emphasize that enough. That's really at the crux of it all. And there's a lot of attention paid to what is going to be needed in order to get that job and keep that job. And I probably should just take a little side note here, because I was an employer over 25 years, and because I hired probably about 1,200 people in my lifetime. And I let go probably 600 or 700 of those people. So, for various reasons. And so I see the world from the lens of an employer. I always have, even as a full-time instructor. That's where my heart lies, and that I know what I was looking for and what I needed in order to move my company forward. I don't think it's a lot different than what most employers are looking for. So with that said, just keep that in mind as you're listening to my comments. So here's another description. I kind of like this one. It's simple, and I got this actually off of an advertisement for a for-profit college that is promoting CBE as part of their program. School is school, right? And then from there, we follow this verbiage here. Then rinse and repeat for another course. For those familiar with the routine, it may come as a surprise that an alternative approach to education is gaining popularity, competency-based education. And this next statement, competency-based education is a method of academic instruction and evaluation based upon students demonstrating their mastery of a subject. This method focuses on having students show what they know and applying the concepts they've learned to evaluations that show they've truly grasped the subject. Now, a key word there is show, and truly, and the key term would be truly grasp. And we'll talk about that some more. So defining competency, there's 3 different definitions of competency, and I just like to focus on some key terms here: performance goal in the first one, successfully perform in the second one, and third, successfully perform is used again in these 3 different definitions. And I guess what we're trying to get here get to is performance, our ability to actually perform key tasks or whatever that employer in a given discipline might want. That's the goal. And the goal is for the student not to leave that program until they've truly demonstrated that competency. So just an opportunity here to think a little bit about what it might mean to you, assuming that many of you are instructors. As an example, if you were an architect, would a complete set of building plans demonstrate mastery? In other words, as a student, if you had the ability to actually complete a set of plans and you showed that set of plans to an architectural firm, that I would think, that's not my discipline, but I would think that that would be pretty darn impressive. English, well, it seems like a reasonable thing to do, to actually write a book. And I'm sure there are English courses right now that do that. And I guess at this point, we might want to just consider that a lot of what we're going to talk about here throughout this presentation, we already do. It's just CBE just brings it kind of to a new level. Information technology, obviously they could create a mobile app or a piece of software. I would imagine that that's already happening out in the community college system. And the question is, at what level is the student released from the program? At what level is it determined that yeah, they could do this again and again for various employers, they're ready. In business, maybe a comprehensive business plan. And there's a pattern to all of this, and that is that each product will have value to somebody. So I think that's an important component, that whatever we are educating for in a CBE program, the end result what we're going to call the capstone here is going to be directed towards something that will have value to somebody. So if you're not sure what a competency might be in your discipline, might want to just ask yourself, maybe jot it down. What do your employers provide, make, or do? That's a good starting point. And which piece of that pie would cause your students to stand out as capable, ready to work, perhaps most important, trainable? In HVAC, what I often would tell my students is that, my job here is really to prepare you to be trainable. And I'm going to give you the fundamentals, because your learning really starts when you're in your first 5 years of industry. And reality is that it never really ends, especially as rapidly as the industry is changing. And so now there's some really large capabilities, like to install a complete air conditioning system, as an example, that would represent, the Gran Torino of competencies for an air conditioning company. But obviously that can't be replicated in a classroom. But there are key components of that process of installing an air conditioning system from start to stop, or diagnosing an air conditioning system from start to stop, that if a student could demonstrate that, they would be capable of virtually anything with a little bit of additional training. So these are the sort of things you're looking for when you're thinking about what is my competency for my industry or my discipline. And some of you may already be doing this, and if you are, then congratulations, because you're halfway to competency-based education. If you're wondering by what authority, well, CBE is actually built into the California Code of Regulations, Title V. There is a statewide 8-college CCC pilot that is ongoing. And full disclosure, one of those colleges has backed out, and that's Madera. And that's where the Applied Technology Division near City College comes into play, and one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing today. What we have our eye on is thousands of adults that we know are out there throughout the industry in the trades, where they've established a level of experience or expertise through the School of Hard Knocks. They're looking for change. And very often in the trades, their bodies are starting to wear out. So these are maybe a little older, or maybe they've been hurt. And anyway, they're looking for change. Maybe they're bored. And, they started very often out of high school. Some of them drifted a while in their early 20s or so, and so forth. And then the last 10 years, they really found their mojo, so to speak, in an industry. There's still some room for improvement for those students. For those employees, I should say, or incumbent workers. There's still room for improvement. They feel pretty good about their work, and they don't know that there's necessarily a lot more that can be learned in their given trade. But they know in order to move forward, they've got to achieve that Associate of Science degree and or the bachelor's degree. And in the trades, if you have an Associate of Science degree, that's a big deal. It's kind of like having a master's in English, because most people in the trades are coming out of the high school and maybe a trade, somehow or another they fall into the trades, and that's where they end up, and they never actually attend college. So, but they're very demotivated by the idea of time spent in a classroom learning about something they think they already know about. Now, what we often find is once they come back to school, say as air conditioning being their major, or construction, or whatever it is, there will be they're not as polished as they thought they were, but nonetheless they have some real skills there, and they've also learned how to work with people and how to and how to organize and so forth. So they've got a lot of inherent skills that are going to help them as they move through their general education work. So they're primed, they're ready to go, or they want to go. They have a need, but very often it's hard. The hardest, they're very jazzed about the general education, but not so jazzed about their major work, because that's what they've been doing and they feel qualified anyway. So CBE provides a way for them to prove that and move on to their GE work. So a little bit of history. CBE was established by a group of 7 senators in 1997. They basically saw a reason for an institution with emphasis on adult learners, and they established Western Governors University. So in 1999, WGU began accepting students, and you can see a little bit of movement here over the years. In 2016, I was enrolled in 2015. 2013. 2013, I was enrolled, and at the time, I think there was about 50,000 students. Now, in 2016, 76,000 students, and 2021, 150,000 students. And so there's no doubt that there's a need there, just judging from their enrollment alone. So there's another reason to pursue CBE. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why we see it into Title V at this point and supported by community college system. We have a deficit here. There are 20.6 million adults in California, ages 25 to 64, and you can see some equity gaps here. 12.3 of them have no college degree, 8.7 have a high school diploma but no college degree, and only 4 million have some college credits but no degree. So we do have some issues there. And then when we look at our demographics, we see some equity gaps in the Latino, Black, Pacific Islander, and so forth. So clearly we have issues there as well. So there's a need to bring those adults back into college. Here's some more information. Just over half of Californians with some college but no degree are people of color. I think we've all seen these kind of stats. And then adults with some college but no degree are less likely to own homes. And you know, owning a home, I think, is a part of gaining stability and beginning that process of really beginning to enjoy a fruitful life because of the security associated with that. So there's another reason to pursue CBE, and that's FTES. And what this is our Fresno County High School graduate projection. And you might notice we're seeing a pattern here. Now, I don't really know what the reasoning is behind this. The data came from the Demographic Research Unit, California Department of Finance, but we can see there is a pattern. And then if we look at the extended version of this, which takes us all the way out to 2044, definitely a tough guess, but I would assume there's a little data behind it. You can see that we're going to be at an extreme by the time we get to about 2038, 2040, and we need those high school graduates in order to fill our classrooms, and they may not be there if this data is correct. So the adult learner is going to become, could very well become part of the community college system in a bigger way than they ever have. Here's a different way of looking at the data. This again is from the Demographic Research Unit again. In this particular, let's see, I can't, let's move this. Oh, the Zoom is blocking my view, so I can't tell if this is South. Oh yeah, that would be South Valley. This is South Valley. And you can see a projected enrollment range of negative 33,000, almost 34,000 students in the South Valley. And the next slide, we're looking at the North Valley. And the North Valley is holding its own a little better, but no growth to speak of is expected. So for whatever reason, the South Valley is definitely going to be affected more than the North Valley, judging from this data. So again, it's pretty clear that we're expecting something kind of big when it comes to available high school graduates that are ready to enroll in college. So the adult learner is a natural fit for what we need to fill our classrooms. So just a little bit of thought here on what an adult learner characteristic might be. When I earned my master's degree, which was in higher education, I really hadn't spent a lot of time getting in depth as to learning modalities and so forth. And one thing I didn't really realize at the time was that there was a big difference between a 20-something up to the age of, say, 25, especially a male, and how those students in that 20-something range were really, by and large, child learners, meaning they would be, they would want to be guided along their journey, and didn't have an independent spirit, unlike the adult learner, which is actually technically at about the age of 25 for adults, a little bit younger for females. 25 years old for males and a little younger for females. So the adult learner has grown up and they see the world a little differently. And so if we're going to design a program for an educational program for an adult learner in mind, we really have to keep these concepts in mind. So the first one is that they're self-directed. You'll hear that very, very frequently when you hear people talk about adult learning. And the CBE curriculum allows that adult learner to choose the skills that must be established. Like I said earlier, I had certain skills that I was strong in. I could, in the business side, I could look, working on my bachelor's degree, I could look at a balance sheet and a P&L and knew exactly what that was. So I had, it was pretty easy for me to navigate those courses, and I moved through them quickly. Then again, and by quickly, I mean I might have been out in 3 weeks of a given 3-unit course. But I had others, say in human resources. Well, with human resources, I had handled and managed a lot of employees over my years. But I wasn't that good on the technical side of what it meant to be a human resource manager. So I actually slowed way down in that. They're practical and results oriented. They want to know where they're going to go. What's this for? And this is where CBE really shines. So most CBE programs are going to have a final assignment, that summative assignment that I call a capstone. And that student in a CBE program can go directly to the capstone if they feel like, if they're ready. There's usually a qualification process that demonstrates readiness to proceed with that capstone. But this gives the adult learner clear direction on where they're going to go. Why are we here, and what am I going to get out of it? So when they see something tangible, something that could have value to somebody else, that's a big motivator. They tend to be less open-minded, and therefore they're resistant to change. Here, this quote: maturity and profound life experiences usually lead to rigidity, which is the enemy of learning. So the ability to exercise our life experience, what I'll call maturity here, alongside lessons learned from our School of Hard Knocks as we worked through our job and moved up in the world the best we could. When we can find success, when we can move in the areas that we feel strong as adults, we kind of say to ourselves, hey, I can do this. If I can do this, I can move forward. It keeps the retention moving. So adult learners are slower learning, but they have more integrated knowledge. So they may require a couple extra passes of reading before they're really going to get it. But they also have this life experience that's going to help drive them towards a deep understanding. And they also use personal experience as a resource. Sometimes when we're talking about using personal experience as a resource, if you think about back in school and you had to do an important assignment, whatever it might have been, and especially if it was something live in person, like in a lab, something like that, your knees would be shaking, maybe hands were shaking, real nervous, right? Well, over the course of a decade or two, we will tend to gain confidence in that kind of scenario. And that's what we're talking about here in personal experience. The adult learner is not going to have to overcome some of the same fears. They will have those same fears, but they'll be mitigated and they're not going to have the same value as compared to when we were young. Motivation. Their motivation is voluntary. And it's a personal choice for them to attend school. So motivation is really key. And we'll talk a little more about one of the components of motivation in a CBE program. They're used to juggling a lot of responsibilities and they need flexibility. So again, the CBE program is going to provide flexibilities. They also have high expectations. They really are determined to get something out of what they're doing. So when the program is centric to their lives, how it can actually improve their lives, it makes a difference in their willingness to stick with it and make it happen. So you'll hear this with CBE, time is variable, learning is fixed. In our Carnegie unit system, we measure through seat time. And with CBE, we're going to have the flexibility to allow a student to work at their pace truly. There may be a course that's scheduled over, say, 18 weeks, but they could finish that course in 3 or 4 weeks, potentially. It might take them 6 weeks, it might take them 12, could take them the whole 18. They may actually not finish in that semester and have to restart. So now, but there's an average. There's typically an average, and I certainly had an average. And my average was just about 6 weeks, getting from one class to another, sometimes a little less. So we're going to be able to move from course to course this way through a required demonstration of mastery or proficiency. And what we're looking at here is a very high level of achievement, and we're really eliminating C work. We want that work to be at least be B work, and they really need to have demonstrated through that capstone work their ability to really grasp the subject in a deep way. So we're determined by rigorous assessments. Part of the CBE experience for the student is focus on the student learning journey. When I was a student at WGU, I had a lot of different irons in the fire, and and at times, as an adult, it was really hard to focus and keep the engine moving. A key component of that for me was a process where WGU had academic coaches, and those academic coaches would contact me once a week. I had one coach assigned to me. I also had a very difficult circumstance that occurred in my life at that time, and I actually quit at one point. And that coach helped me re-engage and kept me going. So that for me, that coach was an important part of it, and it really now looking back, the journey wouldn't have been complete without good support from the institution, and not just on a semester basis, but literally on a weekly basis. And this might be one of the things that we have one of the hardest things for us to achieve as a public institution, and in the way we're accustomed to doing things. So here we're talking about the academic life coach that maintains very regular contact. When an academic life coach is not available, faculty must assume this role. Now, I got to say, at WGU, the faculty were not necessarily extremely supportive, but because they were always, what I understood later is what they were trying to do is convey an air of independence. They wanted the student to take hold of that learning on their own terms and move through it. And so they were careful about how much support they would give. Now, in that scenario, had I not had the academic life coach, I would have failed. It was the life coach that made the difference. Ideally, at WGU, I would have had the life coach available to me, and the faculty would have been supportive. That would have been a real great combination. So we've already talked about it being a flexible, self-paced approach. The idea here is that we're going to finish one course and move on to another. So as an instructor, we might actually end up managing several courses at once as a CBE instructor. Maybe you're assigned to, say, 3 different courses of a 6-course program, something along those lines. And you're going to have students of all different ages working through curriculum at their own pace. And so this does work best in an online environment or in a hybrid environment. In the case of the Applied Technical Division, we'll probably end up with a hybrid presence. And again, students are going to slow down. They're going to speed up as they move through. Next up. So we're going to use pass and no pass grading. And I'm going to show you a rubric in a few minutes that kind of helps paint that picture. At WGU, the grading is done by a third party, which I think is a valuable thing because it does allow the instructors to become truly objective in their teaching. But 80% or greater is a typical passing grade. And in less than 80%, one or more of the criteria is a no pass or incomplete. Now, again, that doesn't mean you fail the class. It means that you keep trying and you figure out what you don't know and you move forward from there. One of the challenges we have at an institution also is our transcripting. In our transcript, we're going to have to convey a value for that 80% or greater work. You're not going to get it's not going to show that you were, an extreme or a great student. It's just, you're just going to be a B student or a C student. But I think for the massive industry, I know that I personally never, when I hired somebody, even on the administrative level, I never looked at their transcript. I looked at whether or not they had a degree. I might even look that up to see that it was a real degree. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about whether or not they were a B average or C average. Now, I know that's that's not the way we would operate in the academic world, but I think a lot of industries that way. But I'm not sure there's a lot of value in having an A or a B. What's important is that they got through the program and that they're competent when they exit. And so an ideal scenario would be on the transcript that we end up with a listing of our competencies. So now, because we're giving a single grade for all of our work, that listing of competencies can accompany that, and that gives us the employer an even better idea and probably a more valuable idea of what we really know. I hear this a lot, that a CBE is for type A personalities. I heard it just the other day. And maybe in the absence of an academic coach or a faculty member who will play a support role, that's the case. Some might classify me as an A personality, so I'll have to confess there. But I also had a really severe personal crisis at the time, and that greatly affected my ability to move forward. My academic coach made a difference there. So, and I would like to relate that in my own experience in teaching over the last 9 years as a full-time faculty member, that I think there's a percentage of students that are B or C students in the system that we know now, but have never been given a chance to really work independently with a clear end goal in mind. And having thought this way and having designed some of my courses with that thought process in mind, I've found that sometimes there are B, even C students who everybody thought didn't have the ability to move independently and to work through their work on their own terms. But when they were given the clear picture of what the end goal was, and when they had the ability to pick and choose what they needed to work on, it made a difference in their ability to move forward. So, like any other assessment in our educational world, we're going to have assessments that are presentation-based, papers, projects, so forth. You'll tend to have more projects than anything else in a CBE world. You're going to create something, which is our highest level of learning. You're going to use a no-pass rubric with pretty comprehensive criteria, and I've got an example for you here in a minute. In the objective base, you're always going to have timed examinations. You're going to have multiple choice, yes, no, true, false, fill in the blank, all the stuff we're used to seeing. Again, 80% pass rate applies. In the 100% online world, which Western Governors is, they would subscribe again to a third-party testing party, and they would watch you from home take the test with a camera. And boy, if your eyes drifted, they would stop the test right then and there. They had a very specific way of setting up the camera, and they were really and it was rigorously enforced. So another way to assess would be an authentic way, and probably the best example I can think of right now would be like a nursing credential. And in fact, one of the programs through WGU is a nursing program. All right, so here's an example of a rubric from WGU. This is one of my rubrics. And just to demonstrate the point, I'm going to enlarge that. And I think you're seeing, let me make sure you're seeing what I think you're seeing here. So this is a 2-page rubric, and this is what it looks like. You'll see at the top of the column, unacceptable, needs revision, meet standard, and exemplary. Now, the bottom line is, if in any one of these, anything on the left here that doesn't meet standard, they're going to get marked, say here or here or here. And if any one of these are not acceptable, then that assessment is a no pass. You have to be at meet standard or exemplary, either one of those. And if you look at some of the different criteria, ratio calculations, horizontal analysis of income statements, balance sheets, indications, justification, industry comparison. I always like that. Focused on the industry is, are we thinking the way our employers are going to think? And overall holistic. So that's a pretty decent rubric. And as one example of what we do. Now, here's another one. Here's a pass. Whoops. All right. So here's a pass. This is marketing.
You still have some rubric, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I changed the rubric. So let me make sure you're seeing the right thing here. All right. So you should say MKT up here in the left-hand corner. So here is a marketing rubric from Western Governors. Same sort of thing. As long as you were here or here, you were a pass for that competency. Anything over here, go back to the drawing board, figure out what you don't know, then try again. All right, so let me get back to where we were at. All right. So assessments in CBE very much follow Bloom's taxonomy. And what we see here is that when we get to that demonstration level, we're following the creation and evaluation level. And that would be the highest level of learning. And that's the assurance that we have that when that student leaves, they have a capability that in my world as an employer means they are different than the other competitors in that workplace. They've got something that really stands out that demonstrates their ability to move forward, so they're trainable. So there's formative and summative assessments, just like we would normally have. The formative assessments always point to the summative assessment. When we're designing an assessment for CBE, we've kind of touched on this already, but we start with the competency, then we go to building the assessment itself. Third, we build the curriculum to support the assessment. And ideally, we have stakeholders that are directly contributing. So examples would be employer, human resource specialist. In other words, what would these people say about what their employers are wanting, professional accreditors, etc. All right, so here's just a kind of a visual of the concept of CBE assessment. Here we have a course and our curriculum that we're learning. And then at some point, we're going to be ready for a formative assessment. In this case, I have two of them. Each one ultimately demonstrates knowledge needed to complete the summative assessment. We also have a second assessment here. So we have a pathway from our coursework to the formative assessment 1, also to the assessment 2. And we also have an alternative pathway here where we're going to go straight to the summative. So if a student truly had that kind of competence, that's how they're going to get out of a class pretty quick. And one of the key components of that is that they're being shown the rubric, and they have a good detailed explanation of what's required in the summative, and they'll figure it out on their own whether or not they need to go here or here first. Now, you could design the program without this path, but in a typical CBE scenario, we would allow them the ability to go straight to go if they think they can do it. There's also probably going to be a little bit of assessment on some level just to know that they're somewhat ready for that project. So from here, we go to the program summative assessment. And of course, each course is feeding into that. The ideal scenario here would be this summative assessment is a standalone, is its own course in the program. So, so once we've completed each one of these, we're allowed to complete our summative assessment as part of another class, and then we're out. So each one of those summative assessments serves as roadblocks. And so if we get stuck here at this roadblock, we're not going to be able to make it here. And when that happens, they're going to go back and do this again. Assessment, practice, technical literature, multimedia, and so forth, just constantly. And then when they're ready, go back again and try again. A typical standard would be 4 tries before there has to be some sort of an assessment as to whether or not they are maybe need to do something different. And then, of course, the summative, the big enchilada here, it serves as the final roadblock as well. All right, so a little word about the capstone. It's a summative assessment, obviously. Perhaps the most important CBE component for the adult learner. Now, that's from my perspective. It really kept me, in each course, it really kept me going. And I knew at the very end, I was going to have to create a very comprehensive business plan. So that served as a motivating factor for me. Allowed me to know where I needed, what I was working towards. And I had worked myself out of a job. So I had some interest in actually building a business plan. I never executed it, but I did complete one. And it served as a backup if things didn't work out at City College. Because I really had didn't have a lot of interest in being self-employed again. I'd done that for 25 years. So, so provide the clear vision of what the end goal is. And again, that whatever that vision is, it should have value to that employer. All formative assessments point toward the capstone. We've already talked about that. And again, the capstone is worthy of a requisite course in the program. So a little bit about artificial intelligence. Found this quote: design assessments that require students to engage in group discussions, presentations, or other interactive activities that involve the application of their knowledge and skills. That's what CBE is all about, the application, those demonstration of competencies. So I think inherently there is a little bit of protection against the AI influence because the student is going to have to provide is going to have to go beyond providing an informational perspective. They're going to have to provide an application, a demonstration perspective. So, and also I think it's important I know for me that really there's probably no point in avoiding AI or trying to limit AI because I know when they get in the field, they're working on an air conditioner on a 110-degree day. They're going to use the AI or the internet in general in order to research problems right there on their iPad. So I really want to see that they have good methodology in the use of AI. And so I would have no problem building a AI component into a given capstone because I know they're going to do that out in the field. So another thing that you can apply a lot of creativity here. Now I've done one of the things that I've done in the past is, especially when I had somebody that was working in my program at a more advanced level, usually a student learner, I would allow them to create their own assessment, and that addresses the competence that we're trying to achieve. So that was another way that where you provided a unique perspective and that really makes them have to dig deep. So they're going to have to use some real critical thinking to do something like that. They can also create a simple problem that requires a complex answer. What we're doing here is we're getting beyond the idea of just gathering information and putting it in the right place. We're having to execute knowledge and use it in a creative way. Personal reflections are also good. So the idea is a summary of some sort that describes what they went through as they built that CBE capstone. If they certainly can't describe the process of digging information out of a robot somewhere and use it for that summative, and or for that personal reflection. So they're going to have to dig deep and really, and at some point they're probably going to have to relate the real nature of their learning, which helps give you a vision of what they actually experienced while they were performing that capstone. Another thing we can do is integrate complex context specific problems. List a set of conditions, change the conditions between assessments. This is an area that AI really isn't there yet, unless you have a polished solution, say like a Tesla vehicle that can make hard decisions based on changing conditions. But for the average AI problem that's posed on the internet, when you have changing conditions, it becomes much more difficult to come to a correct answer. So, and in HVAC, of course, we can change the condition. We have all kinds of different operating conditions that change our reality out there in the field. So we can also require diagnose or resolution of dependent problems. Now, what I mean by that is, here's an example. If XXX is performing poorly, then OOO will also perform poorly. XXX is the primary problem, OOO is the consequential secondary problem. So competence in this scenario would be OOO is performing poorly because XXX is performing poorly. And so this requires, we might be able to pull data and we might be able to pull a statement or an understanding through AI of why one condition is occurring, but we'll have the student is going to have a much harder time determining how those two conditions are linked. And that's where their competence comes into play. So not yet competent, their answer is OOO is the problem. XXX is the problem, would also not be competent. And then XXX is performing poorly because OOO is performing poorly, would also be not competent. The right answer there, they'd have to come to the determination that OOO is performing poorly because of the problem with XXX. So critical thinking, I think, is key to the idea of making sure that our students are leaving that classroom with a good quality understanding. Well, that's CBE in a nutshell. Are there any questions?
There weren't any that came through on the chat at all. I think you
right.
explained everything very thoroughly.
Okay. Anybody have something you want to voice? Anybody have experience with CBE? Have you been through one of? Do I have a fellow student here from WGU by chance?
We did have a question come through on the chat just now. It says, how easily do you see this transferring to more knowledge-based programs? So I'm assuming more academic versus CTE type programs, as I'm guessing the question is getting at.
Well, I think it boils down to in that discipline, whatever that discipline might be. I don't want to pick on anybody, but I'm thinking about philosophy. It may be hard to create no, that's not true, because in philosophy, I think in order to finish that program, what if you were to write a peer-reviewed paper? Now here you're creating, and it's being peer-reviewed. So that would be an example, really, of a CBE program. And so there's a lot of knowledge is required. You're going to have to put those pieces up together, and you're going to come up with some sort of opinion on a subject based on that knowledge. So now other disciplines take, like English. I think I already mentioned we could write a book there. So I think that the question is how much depth will there be to that book? And that's where, again, our rubric comes into play. So there's a big difference between writing a book and a good book. So I think the rubric should reflect the good book. So hopefully that answered the question. Anybody else? I see.
Looks
I
like
got
the
now.
chat is pretty quiet, so feel
All right.
free to end a couple of minutes early. I know
Okay.
got a shorter lunch, so that is up to you as a presenter.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you got something out of this. And keep your eye on CBE for the future. We'll see where she goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian.